All right, gentlemen, are we ready to begin?
We're ready.
Let's do it.
Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Geek Fanthology. I am your host, Ian Cordray, and I am joined this week by...
The one true Ben.
And...
Mike?
You know, I think it's funny, like, we just do that so regularly that even though we're still not meeting in person again, and probably won't for the foreseeable... Like, I honestly, I'm avoiding everyone until there's effective treatment for the human malware or a vaccine. No offense to anyone, but I'm trying to be conscientious of pandemics. But I think it's funny that even though I can't point at you, you still know the order that we do that in.
We've had plenty of practice.
A couple of years with the practice.
Speaking of the human malware slash what the pandemic slash whatever, I really like what the Game Grumps have been calling it, which is the Backstreet Boys reunion tour. That's their code word for it, because you can't call it what you do call it on the YouTube if you want to show up in the recommendations list.
But
Which is why I'm not even referring to it anymore, even though I almost don't care.
Aren't a lot more people participating in this than the Backstreet Boys reunion tour be?
I prefer the human malware, but Backstreet Boys reunion tour is funny.
Right.
It's not as pithy though.
Yeah.
Right.
So, couldn't remember whether we talked about this or not. But if we have, then what we're doing now is topical. And if we haven't, then oh well. We're going to be talking about remake culture and reimaginings. We're probably actually not going to be talking about reboots because we feel like that's a separate thing. We're going to be talking about it specifically in the case of video games today. However, before we do that, we do have a signal boost to go over, and I suppose I will start. There's two things I really want to signal boost. One is a subreddit, which is r/itrunsdoom, which is a collection of all of the crazy things you can get Doom to run on. The original Doom. Like, let's see, somebody got Doom running on an iPod. Now, obviously, you have to jailbreak some things, but somebody got their GPU driver to run Doom while running Doom. Like, they got it to render Doom while also 1996 while also rendering Doom 2006. I can't. It's not on the front page here, but the ones I really remember are someone getting Doom to run on a smart refrigerator and on a smart thermostat.
Well, that whole Doom within Doom thing. That's like, I've seen that before. Like that's one of those meta things where like you play a game and there's like an old school game within the game. So it's like, oh, hey, I'm playing this game, and then I go into an arcade within the game world, and then I'm playing Space Invaders or something, you know?
So,
like, you see some of that from time to time.
So Bethesda /id is actually somewhat in on that, because Doom Eternal has a working version of Doom inside it.
I rest my case.
Fallout 76 or Fallout has video games within it that you can put in holotapes on. So yeah.
Yo, dog, I heard you like Doom, so I put some Doom in your Doom so you can Doom while you Doom.
Oh man, that's a throwback meme. I like it.
Yeah, I know.
The other thing I want to signal boost is I once again got into, like, I go through phases, musically speaking, where I listen to various random things, and I got back onto old school rap, specifically A Tribe Called Quest. They're really great, although I'm also a big fan of practically anything that uses jazz as an underlying thing, and they were big into jazz rap, so East Coast jazz rap specifically, but still. So yeah, check out some of their work. Kind of their most famous track, at least that I am aware of. It's what got me into them initially. Is a track called "Check the Rhyme," which is a diss track to MC Hammer. Well, at least partially.
If you really want to go whole hog, you can listen to those fresh beats while playing Doom on an odd device.
You can listen to those fresh beats on your iPod while playing Doom.
Oh, that would be efficient.
There
All
you
on one
go.
device.
All right, Ben, what you got for us today?
Okay, so finally, after because as everybody knows, not only am I old, but my internet's slow. I finally got Fallout 76 loaded up on Steam, so I can now play it a little more readily. So I've been playing Fallout 76. It almost doesn't suck. So
Yeah, the internet has with the Wastelanders expansion and the adding of NPC quest lines, the general consensus is like it's kind of like a worse version of Fallout 3 now.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, right now, I'm at like level 10, and I'm still rocking. I just got a hunting rifle that wasn't like a large pistol.
You know what this reminds me of is it reminds me of when they like revamped the Zune, because it's like they're like, hey guys, this is actually pretty cool now, but like everyone's already moved on and ignored it and doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So like for the people that were like, had a Zune, like that was great, but like
hey,
for everyone else, it didn't
Zune
really
got a call out in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and that wouldn't have happened if the iPod hadn't achieved market dominance.
Right. So here's the other thing about it. You can set up your own personal server if you're on Fallout first.
And it only costs $100 a year.
Yeah, thereabouts. So I figured I'm going to get it for a couple months just so I can enjoy, my own server and invite my friends, and then do it from there. But but yeah, that's been my signal boost for the week, because mostly, I've been doing the work thing, being essential.
Yay, essential employment.
Right.
So I know I sound like a broken record here, but I'm going to bring up Final Fantasy 14. I swear it's topical. It was a eureka thing. I was just like, oh wait a minute, Final Fantasy 14 is the ultimate example of a remake, because Final Fantasy 14 came out, and I still remember this was back when there was actually I had a physical magazine of PC Gamer, and I was actually a subscriber still. And I read the review, and it was just trashing it relentlessly. How I was like, oh, it's a giant cluster, and like it's boring as heck. There's nothing to do, and it's also buggy as heck. And so it's like it's unplayable on both a gameplay and technical perspective, and it was just the worst. And then something strange happened. A big company actually admitted that they made a mistake and endeavored to fix that mistake. Basically what had happened is they had put together a game and slapped the Final Fantasy name on it, and they hadn't really done the due diligence to make sure it was up to that standard of the franchise, of the IP. And I feel like this is a very and this is a compliment. This is a very Japanese thing here that happened. Square Enix was like, okay, we've dishonored ourselves. Thankfully, they didn't just all commit mass ritual suicide. They decided to get rid of the dishonor by fixing the mistake and then some.
As I understand it, seppuku is mostly illegal in Japan these days.
Mostly. So
and how are they going to prosecute you if you're successful? Because you're dead.
Exactly.
There is that. But
anyway, that aside.
So didn't the game itself basically self-destruct?
Yes.
It blew up the world.
Yeah, so technically I'm not boosting the game, I'm boosting a doc about the game, but I'm always kind of boosting the game because I've been having a blast with the game. But there's a series on YouTube, and like most things on YouTube, it is free. Just go to YouTube and watch it. It's called The Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy 14. Now it's Final Fantasy 14 with the Roman numerals going to XIV, not the numbers. Now you could type in either one, bring it up, I'm sure, but just to be pedantic, it is The Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV.
Right.
And it goes through the whole thing. It sets the stage with what I described. I gave you the Cliff Notes version. Well, I guess I didn't actually finish. They were successful. They blew up the world within the game and made that part of the lore. And then when they revamped it, they called it A Realm Reborn, and that was 2.0, and it was successful. And it's had 3 expansions since, and it's still going strong. But yeah, that's
really
just
darn good.
the ultimate remake. So there you go.
These
Check out the
days.
doc, because even if you're not big into Final Fantasy, or you don't necessarily plan on playing the game, if you like documentaries, you like history of video game stuff, or like business stuff, inside baseball type stuff about it, pretty interesting stuff.
Oh,
so what you're basically saying is that the game itself committed seppuku.
Yeah, I guess it's more like the game nuked itself from orbit.
Exactly. Only way to be sure.
Yeah, and it's a unique thing too. A parting thought on that is that I have seen that on MMOs and such, where like the game, they were ending their support for the game, so like all the servers were going to go offline, so they did a cataclysmic event. Like you saw that with like the Matrix Online, and like I think they did something like that for City of Heroes. They've done that on a lot of stuff, but this is unique in that it wasn't just going dark. It was the old shitty thing was going dark, and it was going to be reborn into a much awomer thing. That is indeed what happened.
That actually reminds me. Did you hear that City of Heroes has servers again?
Yeah.
Or specifically has been running a private server for like the last 15 years?
I mean, technically, yes. It's not official.
Well, yes, but like there is a private server still running City of Heroes. And it's a thing. And now I'm getting an echo of myself.
Before we segue, why don't you hit us with the spoiler of the week, Neil?
Yes, the spoiler of the week. Coming soon to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Skyrim Enhanced Edition. Which I figure is kind of a good enough place to start.
There you go. Segue.
Skyrim comes out on every goddamn system. It's like Doom.
Neil, do you have? Are those giant wheels I see under your feet? Because I believe that was a segue.
That is a segue.
And it's not like they're releasing a new game. That's why it's only kind of worth mentioning in passing here, because they're not releasing a new game.
Nope.
They're releasing the same game again.
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, the original release was November of 2011.
And when was the Switch release?
Of Skyrim.
Because I think Switch was the most recent release.
I will check that out.
To the internet!
Luckily, Discord has a new noise reduction thing, so you don't hear my loud...
March 3rd of 2017 is when the Nintendo Switch came out.
And I'm honestly will not be surprised when it comes out on PS5 and Xbox Series X. I'm only half joking with that spoiler.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's only half. It's only half.
It's probably going to happen.
Yep.
Coming soon to a platform near you.
And then give it like 20, 30 years, and can it run Skyrim? It's going to be the next subthread.
Well, I mean, technically Bethesda owns Doom too.
God, I mean, it's going to happen
because they own id.
It's all coming together.
But
yeah, that's all the time that deserves.
Yeah, that's it. Skyrim. And kind of in a similar, my sort of operational thesis tonight is that, especially in the AAA industry, innovation is stagnating because it's a lot safer to just update a game and make it and re-release it. Sometimes really well, sometimes kind of poorly, but
yeah,
there's less innovation because instead we can make Call of Modern Black Ops, Honor, Battlefield 12.
Coblops.
Yep.
But yeah, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley version of the Hollywood syndrome, where they would just re-release the same shit over and over again and make endless sequels to the same things. Now, with games, I feel like, I mean, that's obviously a different topic, but sequels tend to be more, generally speaking, more interesting in a game format since it's such a different media. Obviously, you have things like Madden where they just update the roster, and it's not the case. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of game. You know how people kind of compare the medias, the history of the medias, like, oh, comparing like the history of movies, the history of games, like how long has this industry been a thing, and how long has the industry been popular? So it only makes sense that if Hollywood reached this point where like the major motion picture releases were becoming the same old, truck of crap of, like unimaginative remakes and sequels and stuff, that you're going to have the same phenomenon exist in gaming.
The thing that makes money.
Yeah, it's going to be like another 20, 30 years later or whatever. It's just like, it's going through some of the same phases, some of the same growing pains that film had as a medium.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing that you, God, there was a thought attached to this, and it's like it almost left my head. Never mind.
It completely left my head.
It'll come back, because I was thinking about the whole. Okay. Now, basically a lot of times when they're redoing these things, like they're re-releasing Skyrim and releasing on, and things on new platforms. What it is it's an attempt to get the new audience that has aged into its age bracket.
Yeah, and there are ways to do it well, and there are ways to do it poorly.
This is also true.
Yeah.
Like Bethesda does it the lazy way, which is, hey, here's Skyrim, same game you've bought 5 times before, but now it's on the iPhone,
right?
Or on the other hand, you've got things like Capcom and the new Resident Evil remakes that they've released, which took Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, which, one, like the Resi 2 remake, they waited, 21 years. So some of it is actually a little bit of, is kind of having people remember, oh, hey, right, Resident Evil 2, it had a storyline. But also they completely rejiggered the game. Instead of being, top-down fixed camera, it's over-the-shoulder third person.
Well, it's not quite that old, because I think that the first PlayStation came out in like 95 or something.
Well, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. Resident Evil 2 was released in 1998. Resident Evil 2 Remake was released in 2019. So it's 21 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that does track.
Yes. Math.
Wait, no. Yeah, 21 years. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're right. 98 to 19. Mm-hmm. Math works. You're doing that new math, aren't you?
To quote Tom Lehrer, it's so simple that only a child could do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But shout outs to Tom Lehrer, by the way. A very I don't know if Ben, do you even recognize that name?
Tom Lehrer?
Yeah.
Lehr?
Leher. Tom Lehrer.
It sounds familiar, but I don't know what from what.
All right. First
digression of the week.
Tom Lehrer was a humorist and satirist and piano player, and also a Harvard educated mathematician, who was born in 1928, so a little bit before your time there, Ben. Not just hugely obligatory Bennett's old joke, but
too late. Already made it.
Yep. Most notably, you've probably at least heard him sing the names of all of the periodic table of elements to the tune of "I Am the Very Model of a Modern Major General."
Which didn't the Animaniacs do that with the countries?
They did the countries, but it wasn't to the same song.
Okay.
But it's a very similar concept. He also claims to have invented the Jello shot. Because when he was working at Los Alamos, he had a very interesting career. They wouldn't let you bring alcohol onto the base, but you could bring Jello. So, according to his claims, he invented the Jello shot because he wanted to drink on the job at, NORAD.
Right.
Sounds like a great idea. What could possibly go wrong?
I know, right? He also wrote some songs for the Electric Company, which was your time, Ben.
Yes, and he also wrote for the television show This Is the Week It Was.
Mm-hmm. It's very humorous. I've got a CD with all of his songs on it. He's a fun guy.
Oh yeah.
Anyhow,
how about that Resident Evil?
Yeah, Resident Evil. So like Resi 2 and Resi 3, completely like they are what I would call a reimagining as opposed to a remake, because they told the same story but they told it in a different way. It's almost an adaptation.
Yeah.
Almost.
I feel like that's an appropriate amount of time. Like, it's been 20 friggin' years. Like,
yeah.
people that might want to play, people that have played more recent games in the franchise or whatever, but they can't really bring themselves back to like the graphics and like controls of 20 years ago. That's totally
You were
understandable.
almost a Jill sandwich.
Yeah, some of that stuff, that voice line. You, Jill, the master of unlocking. Oh God.
Although, if I recall correctly, when they remade Resident Evil, they actually kept an option to do the old voice tracks.
Yeah, they would. There's some shout outs, some kind of poking fun at their own, ridiculousness from back in the day.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't really. I haven't played any of the newfangled ones. Closest thing for me is just playing a port. I played the Wii version, the Wii edition of Resident Evil 4, which is actually pretty great because you got to aim with the waggle, so you could be a friggin' crack shot with that thing, just headshots for days.
Very nice. Yeah, I like that. That seems like a good piece of innovation.
Oh, and also with the waggle, you have like those like quick time events where you're like struggling over a knife or something, so you get to like shake it around, so it's like you're actually struggling with somebody. It's pretty great. It was surprisingly fun.
I can't remember whether did I play it or did I just watch some videos of it, but I do remember like thinking that the Resi 2 remake looked just fantastic. Was there a demo of Resident Evil 2? Did I play that maybe?
I know not these things.
Yeah, there was a demo. Then I think that was what I played.
So I didn't really play much of that franchise. Mainly just 4. I've played a little bit here and there, but mainly just like demos or playing.
I played 4, and like I own 4 on my PS2. And aside from that, I'd not played any of the Resident Evil games either. But it is just like I have watched enough old runs of Resident Evil 2 and 3 to know that I wouldn't be able to stand them.
Yeah, they have those like tank controls.
Tank controls, fixed cameras.
Yeah, fixed camera would get really frustrating.
Like
I did play. I take it back a little bit. I did play. I played Resident Evil 2 on the Nintendo 64, and yeah, those controls are so antiquated.
Yeah, it was okay for what it was at the.
Yeah,
but it just.
Well, it was a product of its time. People were just figuring out what to do with 3D games at that point. Like,
yeah, it was original PlayStation. It was was the 90s, yo.
I mean, it's like looking at the polygons in Virtua Fighter, and you're just like, ugh, like it's an eyesore now, but at the time it was impressive.
That segues a little bit into a thing that I can talk about, and that is the remakes of the Yakuza games. Yakuza Kiwami and Yakuza Kiwami 2, which were remakes of Yakuza 1 and 2, that not only that still did the same story, but updated the hell out of the graphics engines and the combat, and input a lot more interesting, random, crazy mini games. The reason I can segue there is because one of the crazy mini games in Yakuza Kiwami 2 is Virtua Fighter 3.
Well played.
It's just you can play Virtua Fighter 3 in Yakuza Kiwami 2.
You can get your Doom while you're Doom when you're Doom. On the iPad.
Because it's all owned by Sega, so why not?
Yep.
Yes.
Of course, I guess the real the thing that made that there were two things that made me think about this. The first one is a game that none of us have played except for me in the demo, and that was the remake of Final Fantasy VII, which I don't like the combat in it, but I didn't like the combat in Final Fantasy either. And it's kind of it's very similar combat. I don't know. I just couldn't get into it. Maybe I'll try it again at some point.
From what I saw in the videos I saw, it seemed like it was more of a real-time action gamey kind of thing as opposed to a traditional turn-based thing.
It is. It is entirely real time. Which, if you like that sort of thing, great. If you don't, then
yeah, that's very much your mileage may vary based on your personal preferences, I think. I wasn't expecting it. I just kind of assumed that most things would be the same when I heard of, because, I heard little rumors and whisperings of it over the course of several years, as everyone did. Yep. So I wasn't expecting them to change up the battle system. But when I saw it, I'm like, you know what? That's actually probably a good idea because they're going for a more like immersive, like consistent, connected narrative. So you don't have those jarring transitions because of the old tech that you were limited by. So instead of like exploring an area and then like, oh, it's got to do the traditional like voot 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 Final Fantasy thing, and like your screen swirls around or does some ridiculous visual effect, and then you're like in this other perspective that feels like you're in a completely different place, and you just have a little like painted on background in 2D or whatever. Like, now granted it was a little bit less 2D in Final Fantasy VII, but still, it felt like a completely different thing where you're like, oh, you're in this one mode and now you're in this mode, and you're very cognizant of I am a person moving an avatar around in a video game, as opposed to just I am this character exploring this place and then I happen to across these creatures or people or whatever, and then you're just straight into the fight.
Although, also kind of interestingly and ironically, Final Fantasy VII Remake also gets into one of the lines I was kind of wanting to draw, which is it's not entirely a remake. Spoiler alert for anyone who, I don't think you should care at this point because it's been out for 2 months, and if you really cared, you probably
already have it.
Played it already. But spoiler alert for the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a 40-hour game in and of its own right, theoretically. At the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, you fight Sephiroth. And then also you fight these things that are trying to enforce the predetermined existence of the timeline. As per essentially trying to make the world of the remake exactly match the plot of the original Final Fantasy. And you kill the personification of destiny. Thus, theoretically, anything that happens after this is untrodden territory. Which means it's not really a remake, it's more of a reboot.
I was under the impression that it's coming out in multiple releases, and the end of this first release that just came out, you're up to roughly the point that you were in the original game, where you like go to Shinra Tower and there's the big explosion and all that shit.
Yeah, essentially you just finished. Except it really wasn't disc 1, but you just finished Midgar.
The first act or whatever.
You finished Midgar in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Right. But in the original game, you don't fight Sephiroth.
No, but you do in this one. Also, Zack from Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core is still alive.
Yeah, that's weird. I heard about that.
It is essentially, since they have essentially killed the personification of fate. At this point, the designer Tetsuya Nomura, who is primarily responsible for the Kingdom Hearts games, can essentially rewrite the Final Fantasy story.
Well, I will say this: congratulations on your giant pair of brass balls. Because if you do something like that and like the fucking rabid and massive fan base, like if you write it in a way they do, well, I shouldn't say if. It's just a matter of how many people are going to be seriously pissed off with where the story goes.
Yeah,
it's kind of like Star Wars, right? Where like no matter what you do, there's going to be a sizable segment of people that are like, "I hate it."
You ruined my childhood, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah, all that crap.
Yeah. So and that
definitely going to be a thing going forward. Obviously they're probably going to find a way to kill Aerith.
As long as it doesn't suck,
which I think is honestly probably a misstep. They should still kill Aerith.
As long as it doesn't suck, I'm pretty pleased with that decision because, like, I feel like why do all this if it's just going to be like a fancier shot-for-shot remake? You know, like why go through all this time and effort and cost and all these like really talented writers and programmers and artists and stuff if it's just going to essentially be the shinier version of the same game.
Oh yeah, but we're going to have to wait until Final Fantasy Remake Episode 2. Final Fantasy VII Remake Episode 2 coming soon in 2035.
Yeah.
Because it's Squaresoft, and God, do they take their time in making shit.
You know, I wonder
if they make very polished shit.
I wonder if they're gonna strategically release that at some point to move PS5s.
Oh, almost definitely.
Like that might be part of the game plan there. You want to get people hooked, and then be like, "Stay tuned." Oh, BT Dubs, you got to buy this new expensive console. Up. Hey.
Well, I mean that's coming. That's coming at the end of the year. PS4 is at the end of its lifespan. So is Xbox One. The new gen is coming.
It's coming. What now?
The next gen of consoles from Sony and Microsoft coming. So in the next 7 months.
I've kind of lost track of all the iterations, so it all just kind of bleeds together for me because I'm mainly gaming on PC these days.
Yeah. Oh, right. That does allow me to say, by the way, the new computer, Melpomene version 3.0, alive and kicking.
Yes, I'm afraid it is quite operational.
You may fire when ready.
Melpomene, named after the Greek muse of tragic poetry, because a more apt name for my computers, especially hardware, is very is hard to come by.
Ben, you don't want to quote that line because then that means his computer is going to blow up in 5 minutes.
No, it's going to blow up it's going to blow up something nearby.
Yeah.
Because it is fully operational.
Blow up the planet all around.
Well, yes, but then 5 minutes after that, it will in turn blow up. That's my point.
Well, only if Red 5 shows up.
Get your Red 5 repellent.
It's humorously, it has 4 times the cooling fans, which is to say it has 4 cooling fans in my old computer. But 4 times sounds better, but it is significantly quieter, I think.
Quad power.
Those 4 fans don't have to rev up nearly as hard as the fan.
So it's actually got 400% cooling power.
Like I said, it's got 4 times the number of cooling fans. Now, technically, I've got places I could put 2 more cooling fans if I felt like it. Like I could really just completely kit this thing out if I really felt like it, but it'd be overkill.
And this is a bad thing. Why?
It's not a bad thing. It's just redundance.
You're welcome to NASA.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also got tempered glass sides, so I can see the cool RGB RAM that I have.
Right, and it's nearly bulletproof.
I don't really feel like testing that particular hypothesis.
I was gonna say if somebody's gonna be shooting here your computer, you've got bigger issues.
Right? But at least you've got something to hide behind.
Well, I think honestly the steel on the other side of the case is probably even better than the tempered glass, honestly.
Well, there's that too.
Actually, no, it's probably aluminum, but still. No, I'm sorry. It's steel because it's magnetic.
Ah, there it is. Yeah, let's go ahead and put a magnet on the side of your computer to test that shit out.
I actually do have a magnet on my computer. It's not a problem. Magnets really only interfere with hard disks. And you know what my computer doesn't have?
Hard disks.
It doesn't have a hard disk. It's got a solid state drive instead.
Woohoo, look at you being all fancy. Back in my day, we didn't have solid state disks.
It was really interesting. When I first turned it on, I pressed the power button and there was Windows. Like there was not a boot up sequence. It was just, oh yeah, here you go.
It's like you just opened a window, imagine.
Yes.
Right?
I've never had that happen before. Now, these days it would take a little bit to load, like an entire maybe 10 seconds, because now it has to launch Steam and other things when it opens, but...
Right?
Yep.
Because things, but
I think we've gotten off track again.
Just a little bit.
The other thing the other remake that made me want to talk about this, and I will now capitalize more of this episode, is the remake of Seiken Densetsu 3, also referred to as Trials of Mana on the PS4.
Let's say, because those were words.
So Seiken Densetsu 3, Seiken Densetsu is literally a Holy Sword Legend, if I recall correctly.
Gesundheit.
Better known in the West as the Mana series. Secret of Mana, Trials of Mana, Legend of Mana, Sword of Mana, and ironically, in 1991, Final Fantasy Adventure.
So fucking random. I played that game on Game Boy. I had no idea it was part of a different series.
It's technically the first Mana game that was ever released.
Weird.
Whacked.
And I have this to say: it's a really fun game, but it's like kind of amazingly easy. I was like, you know what? I've played Seiken Densetsu 3 before. I've played the hell out of it on. It's one of the few games that, I'll say I emulated it because it was the only way I could play it. Never made it to America, so you had to pirate the game to play. That's the only piracy that I will admit to.
Ever.
Yeah. That I will admit to and not edit out. There was no other legitimate way to play it. So I emulated it. And now I own it. So take that. Or hey, Square, maybe emulation can potentially be a good thing because it builds a market. In any case, it's a lot of fun, but I had to play it. But I was like, I'm gonna play this on hard because I'm good at this, because I played the hell out of this game. I wish there was a harder difficulty, because hard was really easy. There was only a single boss there was only a single time it lost and died. And it's against that one boss that always kills everyone.
Yeah.
There's a wall that breathes fire and spits out traps and shape-shifting monsters. And if you don't have the right setup to fight it, you pretty much just are going to lose. And I had just forgotten about its existence and didn't properly prep. If you do properly prep, it's a walk in the park. But you gotta go in with water elemental stuff.
So if you properly prep, it's a perambulation in the park.
Yes. Precisely, as a matter of fact. That's a lot of fun, and I do highly recommend it. It's a 3D. It's another 3D game, and it's plays a lot like a beat 'em up as opposed to an RPG.
See, RPGs are what I like. I don't know what the.
Well, the mana games have always had active combat. So I think it's funny how I didn't like this in Final Fantasy VII, and now I'm
Right.
praising Trials of Mana for having practically the same thing. Just the
Right.
setup is different, and because it was a game that was designed around it from the 90s back then, I have less problem with it because it was what I was expecting too.
Sometimes things just click, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
That actually brings up
Maybe
another
I'll try it
point.
again now that I played Trials of Mana and be like, man, this is the shit.
That kind of reminded me that's another trend is that you see a lot of old school like beat 'em up games, side scrollers being re-released or update reworked, graphically updated on modern systems. You see things like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game and Final Fight and Streets of Rage and all sorts of stuff like that. Matter of fact, oddly enough, they came out with a new Streets of Rage game just now, Streets of Rage 4.
I know, right?
Talk about a long dormant series. Good lord.
Who owns that one? Is that Sega or is that?
That's Sega Genesis, yeah.
Okay. Well, no. I mean, what company owns Streets of Rage?
I don't know.
Let's check. Streets of Rage is owned.
It's a Battletoads game that came out recently too.
Mm-hmm.
Relatively recently.
Yeah, it Streets of Rage is a Sega property. Sega and Capcom have both really been on the remake train of late, and the updated re-release of stuff.
Well, that's unsurprising considering how Capcom would milk the shit out of its existing franchises like Street Fighter just shamelessly.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that I'm kind of waiting for Capcom to make another Mega Man game. It's time.
Oh yeah, that's another thing is they did Devil May Cry, and that's had both. That has had remasters and a reboot where they rebooted the series.
Mm-hmm.
I never played that game, but it actually got pretty good reviews.
Yeah, a lot of people were upset of DMC, which is what it got referred to.
Right.
That if you could get past the fact that it's entirely different people, like entirely different characters.
Yeah.
Like it's an entirely different story. If you can get past just play it, that it's a really, really good Devil May Cry game.
Yeah.
Just it's not set in it's just not a continuation of the story that you and the characterization is radical.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to expectations really.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to those games, I feel like I'm mainly in it for the gameplay and not necessarily like a specific character or story. Like I'm just there for a really good action-y game. So if it's a really good action-y game, I don't really give a shit about some of the specifics. Like,
and apparently it's a really good action-y game.
Yeah.
Just people got mad because it's because Dante doesn't have white hair.
It's scary. Basically. Yeah.
I don't like change.
Everybody needs a little change.
Well, the funny thing too is like in a lot of those situations, the little things like, oh, he doesn't have the trademark white hair anymore or whatever. Like the only reason that they attach any significance to that in the first place is because it was a thing that was part of the thing that was such a great playable game. Like the thing itself is meaningless. They're just associating it with a good product. And they're like, oh, I'm upset that there's this new really good product that's different. And it's like, all right, I mean, it's like the whole it's like the meme that's been going around about how social media is, where somebody's like, well, I prefer mangoes to oranges, and like, well, you're basically saying you hate oranges. Also, you didn't bring up pineapples and grapefruits and whatever else. Educate yourself.
Yeah,
kind of like that. But the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, it's so like gangbusters. So you have vocal minorities, vocal fan groups that are just gonna wail on the internet because they have nothing better to do.
Well, yeah, they get anything that does not agree with them is therefore evil and wrong.
It's pretty simple. Just don't play the game. Like,
Right.
I don't see why you have to pee in
Well,
everybody else's Cheerios. Like, there's
Right.
there's entire genres of games that I'm not like, I'm not a fan of or I don't play. That doesn't mean I shit over it for everyone. Like, for example, like non-arcadey racing games, I almost never play those. But like, there's a game comes out and it seems pretty objectively good. I'm not gonna be like, oh well, I don't like this kind of game. It's like, well, it's a really good example of that kind of game, so more power to it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you don't trash something just because you don't like it.
There are a few pieces of media that I would argue are objectively bad.
Right.
And I argue with some people over whether they are.
And the thing about it is, like, the most convincing arguments tend to be like, okay, this is how the genre usually works, and this is why it fails at all of these things that you would expect out of the genre. It would be like releasing a suspense movie, and then like everyone immediately knows like who done it or whatever because it's terrible, obvious,
But you should really check out Knives Out, the movie, because it plays with the standard whodunit scenario magnificently.
Yeah.
Because you do in fact know who done it in the first 20 minutes of the movie. But that's part of the interesting fun of it.
Yeah, sometimes it's about, how rather than what. I mean, it's kind of like, prequels come out and you know what's going to ultimately happen to the characters.
Yeah. It's like in the Clone Wars. It's like, it's a shame that all of these guys we're attached to die.
Well, I think, spoiler alert, but, Rogue One, for those who haven't seen it for some reason, pause it, watch the movie, come back, but everyone dies at the end. And it's a Disney Star Wars movie. So mad props, because everyone dies at the end.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
It really
well played, Disney. Well played.
Yeah, I remember having that thought at theater. I'm like, wait, are they really doing this? They're really doing this. And I'm like, good for them.
Okay, we've been talking for about an hour. Just realized there's a nice little timestamp when I tell Craig to join so I don't have to load the episode while I try and figure out how long we've been talking.
Craig's avatar reminds me of the of that bear that Cartman likes. I forgot what his name was, but like he has the little little pajamas with the bear on him and stuff.
Well, now I hate it. I patently hate Cartman and everything that he stands for.
That's kind of the point.
They did too good a job of that.
I mean, there's an episode where he makes a kid eat his parents.
Yes.
So,
which is ironically a callback to Shakespeare. No, like it is pretty much directly the end of Titus Andronicus.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm aware. Yeah. I just hadn't really thought about it. Anyway. Things.
Which, by the way, is a play I've been in.
Which play was that?
When we still did back when people still got together in theaters to watch plays.
Indeed.
Right.
So we've been talking about remakes. Why don't we move over to re-releases a bit, and not just Skyrim, because there's a lot of things that are being re-released that I'm really hyped for. Mike, you mentioned they're going to be re-releasing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2.
Yeah, as a combo pack. I'm not quite sure what the appeal there is. Like, wouldn't 2 just be the better one? But I don't know. Maybe they're different enough.
The thing between 1 and 2 is different levels. Because they're practically the same game.
I see. See, I didn't get in on that until Tony Hawk 3 when it released for the PS2. So
yeah,
I didn't really know what the significance of that was.
A friend of mine owned Tony Hawk 1. He's also the only friend I had with a PlayStation. And the rest of us had Nintendos. He was the PlayStation friend.
Yeah, I remember those days when like you'd have different friends. Like, oh, okay, this friend has this system and this friend has that. And it sounds kind of terrible when you say it. But
I was the NES friend for most. Like, I ended up getting a paper route and getting an N64 with my own hard-earned money. But that was its that but like for the longest time I was the friend who had the retro system because his family was poor. Because we totally were when I was a kid. And I'm not mean, but I was definitely the poorest of my friends.
I had cousins that would come over and they didn't have any systems at all. So like they were totally, not that they couldn't afford them, their parents just didn't do that thing, you know. They didn't get into the video games and stuff, so buy it for them. But yeah, there's like Nintendo, just it was like
So but to go back to it, I'm super hyped for Tony Hawk, because I remember enjoying them, but I don't really have a way to re-experience them. Because like old copies of those games are super expensive, and yes, I have the hardware to run them, but
I don't really have like I'm happy for people, but like I don't really have a drive to like play that kind of game again, really.
I'm pretty excited. I'll probably end up picking them.
Although I would say, if they did a remake of 1080 snowboarding, that might make me bite. Because I had so much fun with that game back in the day. That was a Nintendo 64 game, and it was just so perfectly executed.
That was a good game.
Doing all those spins with the analog stick was just so satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
It was really well done. Kind of like that feeling you get in the Super Mario 64, where you would like swing Bowser around by the tail, and you had to do the whole 360 motion, and it was like a very obvious, like, hey guys, look what we can do, 3D.
Speaking of N64 and Mario games, they think that's probably going to be the thing that back and go back on sale at a reasonable price. And that is Nintendo is planning on re-releasing the GameCube and Wii 3D Mario games again. So they're going to apparently they're going to re-release Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, as well as on the Switch.
You're cutting out there for a bit. Super Mario Galaxy was the last one.
Sorry.
Right?
So Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario 3D World.
Yeah, the exact time you needed to not. Yes, Super Mario Galaxy from the Wii. We got it.
Yeah, 1 and 2 and 3D World.
Right.
And I'm pretty excited for that because those were games I also didn't get to play because I had an N64, but then I kind of moved to PlayStation for. Also, I had a PC at that point too.
Yeah, my trajectory was kind of like Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, PS2, then Xbox 360, PS3, and then Xbox One, as far as like my evolution of consoles.
Yeah. And I went from PS2 all the way to PS4. I skipped a generation because when the PS3 was out, while I wanted one, I didn't have $599 lying.
Yeah, $599. I technically skipped the Wii, but that's kind of an asterisk because it's my wife's console, and I kind of just acquired it by starting a relationship with her. So I don't know if that counts or not.
Is that like a treaty by marriage or something like that?
I don't know, but it is a joint asset.
There you go. There we go. It's part of the So you're taking over the throne of Atari or Nintendo.
Anyway,
I remember, digression. I remember video games being, you had the one console and the cartridges, and you had one joystick with one button.
Atari 2600 had some good games. It also had E.T.
I did actually get to have that particular gaming experience that you're describing there, Ben, because I remember there's an old ass computer that my family had when I was super young, and we had that exact thing where you had like the big old like clunky joystick with the one button on top of it. So I actually did get down with that style a little bit, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that square joystick with a button on the base.
Yeah, it's like it clicks really loud. It's like you're clicking a fancy pen or something. Click, 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 click.
Yeah, taka. And even moving the joystick would click.
Right. Oh yeah, it made a fucking racket. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing that a lot of people forget about is how much quieter gaming is. Like now it's like, you can hear a pin drop, but back in the day it was like all these little whirs and clacks and all this noise.
Well, that's because actuators have gotten instead of being switch based are now potentiometers.
Yeah, they're quieter. they're not analog or digital.
Well, it's not that they're not analog, because a lot of times they are still in terms of how they work, but they're not binary. They're progressive.
The harder you press, the faster it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually the definition these days when people talk about games. They talk about analog controls. They're talking about being able to differentiate pressures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which was a selling point of a very obscure PS2 game called Mad Maestro.
Well, that's a deep cut. I recognize that one.
I own it. It's really hard because you have to press. You have to press the 4 button. It's a direction and button and 4 button rhythm game, but the 4 buttons with the right hand, you have 3 different intensities of how hard you have to press the button. Depending on whether you want a piano note, a mezzo piano / mezzo note, or a forte note, because you are the conductor of an orchestra.
And that's a video game.
And that's a video game.
I mean, they have video games that are tutorials for surgery, so I'm not surprised.
There are video games where you are a bird, like dating other birds. Actually, I'm not clear if you're a bird or not.
No. If you're talking about Hatoful boyfriend, right?
Absolutely.
No, you are a human girl dating birds.
Right. So I feel like if that's a game, anything's a game.
It's like Rule 34 only with games.
They also have a game where you are folding proteins, which that also deserves a shout out right now. There's a game, Fold It, which is a puzzle game about protein folding. That is a free game, and essentially you find ways to make proteins work. Essentially, you find ways to fold. I don't really understand how protein folding works, but it's the basis for pretty much all organic science. Like, people playing Fold It right now are contributing to COVID-19 research.
Yeah, we're at a weird point in history where we have gamified legitimate scientific research to help treat and cure diseases.
Okay, hang on a second. I've got a late signal boost. Hang on a second.
Fair enough. I mean, I just did that too.
I think there's a TED Talk on game theory that talked about the same thing. Anyways, TED Talk gaming. Yeah, it's this Jane McGonigal. Gaming can make a better world.
I think I've seen that TED Talk.
Yeah, it's from 2010. But she talks about gamers, how gamers create a different culture, and we are entering into the era when people sitting at home are doing science.
And that's what Fold It's about. And the best part of it is, you're just trying to get a high score.
Mm-hmm.
But the scientists who then get your high score are like, holy crap!
What did they
never realized you could do that.
Right? Yeah. But again, it comes down to
the rules of physics or science or whatever the hell you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, it comes down to the democratization of things. I mean, granted, you're going to have people who just don't know what they're doing, but
and they don't get a very good score.
Exactly. So then you have people who just experiment and come up with stuff, and it's just like you're tapping into this massive, this massive computing base.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it's referred to as. Extra Credits literally just did an episode on this today, or released an episode on this today. At least today, as of date of recording. And I'm trying to find that episode so I can remember what they refer to it as. Yes, it's a basic concept. It's called citizen or crowdsourced science. Essentially, where you just use human beings as processing centers. There's another game that they mentioned that is teaching algorithms how to better identify cancer.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because essentially you've got like a slide of you get essentially what is a microscope slide, and you have to pilot your ship through space that has been turned into this slide, and you have to avoid the bad things. And the computers, just looking at the raw data, have no idea what the bad things are, but apparently you can see it when you play the game. I don't exactly know, because theoretically you would say that the game has to have identified it, but I don't know.
Interesting.
It's a thing. And frankly, it sounds like a future episode.
Honestly, I think I'll just put a link to this extra credits in the doobly-doo.
That's a technical term, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It is actually
worth checking out. It's also on our Discord server if anyone wants to join our Discord server.
So, and I think actually, Neil, you kind of hit on something here that's a counterpoint to the initial premise of the episode.
Was that innovation is dead?
Yeah, innovation is, in danger, or these types of things are a hit to innovation. But then we have things like the folding the folding game, and this algorithm game that you were just describing. I was so caught up in this on the description. I was like, "Oh, really? If you forgot the name." But I mean, we have these things where creativity is science. Science fiction is becoming science.
Well, it should be pointed out that part of my thesis was that this is particularly endemic in the AAA environment.
Yeah,
and
that was the main context. Is like commercial
and this
AAA.
and scientific games and or like there's a number of indie games where creativity is alive and well.
Right.
The problem is mostly that in the AAA source, it's not like because the AAA industry is is really much more concerned with making games these days.
Right.
They go with the economic safe bet. Where you find your creativity now in these days is on the outskirts. It's in the single and or double A / indie environment.
Precisely, and I think that in and of itself goes to another concept that I've touted before, where and it's not. I'm not going to use it as a capitalism bad, but it is a weakness of current corporate culture. Where that your actual culture is not centered
right.
on.
And that's a fair distinction, because you're talking about capitalism or free enterprise. You're talking about vast amounts of small businesses and individuals and stuff, as well as the giant corporate behemoths and everything. And there's everything in between. And I think that's kind of use a quick comparison here. When you look at the film industry, one of the main problems with major releases is that you have the giant blockbuster Marvel type movie, and then you have the little indie movies, and you don't have much in between. And the in between is what you need to grow. That's the stuff that kind of keeps things creative, keeps the juices flowing, keeps things competitive and interesting, where people can experiment with different ideas and executions of those ideas. And I feel you have a similar thing going in gaming, where you have the giant fuck off AAA things, and like Neil was saying, they're just shitting out this like remake, remaster, reboot, and not doing a whole lot of original IP and games. And then you have the indies that are just flourishing, doing all sorts of different stuff, and just kind of creating that momentum from its own success. And you don't have a whole lot in the middle.
Right, because your indies start to get into the middle, and then the big ones basically come in and gobble that shit up.
And also, to be fair,
I'd like to buy your company and cannibalize.
Well, just setting that aside for a minute, to kind of quasi defend the non-creative corporate people, corporatists, like they're a victim of their own success, where it's like, oh, we have like these giant big budget games, and the budget, like the cost to develop these games is so enormous that they feel like they have to keep things so low risk, because if one does flop, they lose massive amounts of money. And so that's why I think it's so important to have that middle ground, because then people, they don't have their backs against the wall all the time. So they can just kind of do something and believe in it and just kind of see how it goes, instead of having to be like, all right, well, we can't afford to even take this chance like ever. We lost you there, Ben.
I can't tell what you're saying there, Robot Ben.
It's where the rise of the indie games is going to start filling that gap.
And luckily, like, it is possible, like the indie scene in gaming is alive and well. I don't want to come off entirely as doom. The world, everything is problems forever. And heck, even some, like, there are AAA games that come out that I look forward to and play, like like Resident Evil, or like Trials of Mana. I mean, that was made by Square Enix. You can't really develop.
CD Projekt Red's a great example. You got the Witcher series and Cyberpunk coming out soon. Like, those are some real quality, creative, artistic AAA games.
My computer's going to be able to run Cyberpunk, by the way. That was the main reason I built it.
Oh, and Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines 2 will be coming.
Oh yes, looking forward to that as well.
That's going to be great.
But like that's something that we should all try to play and talk about.
That's a silver lining with this, is that the rise of the indie scene is that, like, those people are going to become, they're going to consistently become more like wealthy and influential, and they're going to create their own like big boy studios, or like get hired by bigger studios and have a good influence on them. So like I feel like over time some of it kind of fixes itself in a sense, assuming people are actually smart enough to make those decisions.
Well, plus you do get like the quote like double A
right
developers, like who made Ninja Theory is a really good example of that. Ninja Theory is a they've worked on a number of games. They actually were the ones that made DMC. That we were talking about earlier. But they are semi-independent. They made a game, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, completely in-house. Which is a super great game, and people should play it. They made another number of other games that are highly rated but no one remembers, like Enslaved Odyssey to the West and Heavenly Sword.
Well, I would say another like optimistic take on it is that as as things are increasingly digital and independent, there are less barriers to entry and production and like costs of distribution and stuff where people can actually just do their own thing. It's kind of like self-published authors and stuff like that, where it's like you don't have to be part of this cog in this bigger machine that then takes a giant cut out of whatever it is. And then there's all these kind of like how like television shows where they go through, like you'll have a really great pilot and then there'll be like a boardroom of people that like shut it down or they make it unrecognizable so it's not the original idea and it sucks. So I feel like with gaming, we're getting to a point where they're able to actually do most or all things within whatever that group is and their financiers, instead of having to answer to this like giant dev company that forces them to do like a couple of things or retread the same things over and over.
Right, and I think that comes into the rise of crowdfunding. Fans are taking control of the industry.
It's all connected, absolutely. Instead of fans, and here's another thing to piggyback on that real quick. Instead of fans just going, you know what, like I'm sick of this stuff, EA or whatever company, fill in the blank here. It's like I'm just not going to buy your shit. They can take it in a positive direction and go, okay, this is what I do want. This is what I will make happen, something good, instead of just not perpetuating the bad.
Or exactly, not perpetuating the bitching. Perpetuating.
Also, when they take a hit in the wallet, then in the pocketbook, then sometimes they're able to actually make the right call they should have in the first place. Like Battlefront 2, I'm looking at you
because they're still listening. Hashtag not a sponsor.
Or like Shadow of War.
Right. Yep.
And I think that also gets down to if they see something else working, it gives them the incentive to do that thing that fans are doing that works.
Right. In a weird way, it's a cynical ploy because it's like, oh, if we can just get enough quality stuff out there, then them being the unimaginative, like trend writers that they are, will just copy that, and then we'll have more good things. So it doesn't really matter what the motive is, as long as the end result is good, right?
Well, the thing is, the motive can screw it up. Because I think, they go, oh, this thing worked, let's do that.
Or the whole, how much can we juice ring microtransactions out of it and stuff, like the aforementioned things.
Or they will just execute it poorly, so you have a Diablo clone that sucks.
Well, I think the real problem with that is that then they by association, they tarnish the franchise that they're associated with. Because you're talking about things like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. These are like holy franchises amongst the fan base, And then it's like, then they have to pay the piper because the people that manage the IP are not happy with that.
Right, as well as the fans being not happy with that.
Right.
And although there is that also that whole, you're going to piss somebody off because of how loud those people are, as to who spends money on it.
But in this case, it's actually righteous indignation, though. It's not like a subjective, like, oh, I like this movie better than this, or I don't like, it's more of a thing where most people agree, like, oh yeah, this is like greedy and shitty and dumb.
Right. Well, but you also got to look at what are people spending money on.
Well, sure.
So for instance, Fallout 76, sucked as a game. People didn't like it. People stopped buying it. They had to redo it. But Fallout 4, there's going to be that very loud vocal group of people that are going, ew, it's not this, it's not Fallout New Vegas. But you know what? People spent money on it.
Yeah.
So
money talks.
Money talks. And the other thing is that the majority of people who are going to buy something, who are going to do their talking with their money, are not going to 1-star or 5-star your game. They're going to play it. They're going to buy it. They're going to play it. They're going to buy every DLC that comes out on it.
Right.
And I think that's
buy the DLC if they only kind of enjoyed the game.
You what now?
Or they're not going to buy the DLC because they only kind of bought it and played it.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, it's a balance you got to walk. But I think, like I said, when we're seeing the rise of the indies, they're also having their own niche audience. And they're able to appeal to that niche audience, and that's cool.
So other quick hits here before we digress too far. We talked about just
we're almost out of time too, so we should really kind of start to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Just
Well, I
like
think those are
remasters and stuff. There was Ico / Shadow of the Colossus. There's a bundled remake of that that was on the PS3. Those are originally PS2 games. Those are both really good games.
I think they also got re-released on PS4.
Yeah, it would not surprise me. I think that's been the trend now, is they've been doing that same concept. But it becomes like Russian nesting dolls, because it's like, oh hey, the remaster of the game is now there's a remaster of the game. Anyway, you've got they did StarCraft HD a while back. And speaking of Blizzard, Warcraft 3, when they by the way, when they released this has to have been like the most underwhelming thing for me, of like hearing about any Blizzard thing ever. Like generally I like Blizzard's games, like as a general rule. But when they announced like Warcraft 3 remake, hey kids, remember Warcraft 3? Hey, we're gonna do it again, but it's gonna look better. And I'm like, really?
What's really interesting about Warcraft 3 Reforged, I think it was called.
Oh yeah, that's their snazzy little subtitle.
Was they demonstrably promised things that they did not
deliver on.
Thank you. I could not think of the word deliver. Also, in the EULA, they have they own all to any custom game mode you create.
Seriously? Wow.
Because they didn't
not gonna be any
because
Dota.
they didn't own Dota.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of almost not even mad, because it's like you just point to Dota and you're like, yep, I get it.
Yeah, no, that, like their EULA, and everybody who read the EULA was like, huh, right. So essentially, if somebody comes up with the next Dota, Blizzard owns it, because that's in the EULA.
It's just, yeah, it's like the guy who didn't try to negotiate Lucas out of the merchandising rights. He's just like, why?
Why? Because it wasn't a thing.
Yeah. But yeah, the Warcraft community was actually pretty upset, because it was only a moderate when they had promised a full overhaul.
Yeah.
Especially when people could just point at the re-release that happened around the same time of Age of Empires 2.
Right.
Which, by the way, Age of Empires 2 got re-released a while back, around the same time that Warcraft 3 did. And it was just a million times better.
Yeah. It is funny. Yeah, it's just, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just that's an example of just rampant cynicism. Where like, we'll just do some of the thing and they'll buy it, because they're just a bunch of fanboys that'll just buy it anyway.
Yeah, the problem has very much been that
they're mainly correct.
Blizzard has decided that they don't really have to try anymore.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It was released, by the way, as Age of Empires Definitive Edition, and it is actually like super, super nice, what I'm referring to. They re-released Age of Empires and Age of Empires 2.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing that they did that that Blizzard didn't do when they re-released Age of Empires 1 and 2, they released them for $20 a piece as opposed to $60.
Oh, is it it's $60 for
I think it was 60. Let's double check.
Good God. That's part of it too, is that like if they had introduced that at a reasonable price point, I might have bought it. But like it's not, it transcends the money. It's just like, that's insulting, and I just don't want to buy that on principle.
I'm sorry. Well, at least at this point, Warcraft 3 is down to $30.
Oh, okay.
I think it started at $40.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Started at $20.
Which is still highway robbery, considering the game came out in 2003.
Yeah. See, I still have my discs for that somewhere. If I really want to play Warcraft 3, I can just.
It might have been 2002. It's a pretty old game.
Yeah. I just can't play the multiplayer anymore because it doesn't. It doesn't interface with. It doesn't interface with Battle.net anymore.
That's definitely not a selling point for me because I just got my ass kicked on that relentlessly. So the last thing I want is to have people kick my ass all over again. I was terrible at Warcraft 3 multiplayer for some reason. I was actually pretty good at Warcraft 2, but 3, I just, I don't know, something about the hero system or something. It did not click with me, and I got my butt kicked, and I didn't want to spend a bunch of time trying to get decent because that's not fun losing repeatedly.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing, all the old school D&D games, the isometric ones, some of the best games, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment, they have all had like definitive edition releases. So if anybody never got a chance to play those games, they're big into D&D or just that style of game, or whatever the case may be, they never got to finish it or they just want to play it again. Go check those out because they are legitimately good and actually worth the money. And they're only, they're like reasonable. It's like $20 or whatever. There's sales and bundles and all that good stuff. So check it out if you're interested.
I could have sworn I picked up Planescape Torment somewhere. Where? Sorry.
I need to pick that up again.
I could have sworn I bought a copy of Planescape Torment Super Special Awesome Edition. When did I pick up a copy of Oddworld Abe's Odyssey? Sorry, I'm going through my my Steam library and there's Oddworld Abe's Odyssey sitting there in my...
Going through your Steam library is kind of like going through a closet and seeing all this old shit. You're like, oh yeah, I remember this.
I also don't remember this game called Underhero that I apparently... And a game... Oh, I remember Undefeated. I didn't get that because it was a superhero simulator where you get to essentially get to be Superman. No, apparently I could have sworn.
So I think we're kind of getting into the weeds here.
I've checked all the boxes, gentlemen. Some final thoughts before we wrap up.
Well, I'll iterate again. These games that we're seeing here that are not remakes, in the 1A, we need that to go big.
Yeah, there it is. Sorry, I found it. I do in fact own Planescape Torment.
Well, good. I think we need to fill that gap with people who are willing to not just take risks, but aim for their own market and let that market be enough.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that, a lot of these big franchises or big like genres of games, like at one point in time were anemic or did not exist. And it was somebody taking that step that really made that a thing. And let's just forget that Final Fantasy was going to be the final game that was going to be made, and then it became a whole thing.
The last game that started a franchise.
Yep.
If only he had known. What do you call it? First Fantasy.
Neil, any words of wisdom?
My brain's kind of fried at this point. I'm super tired. So not really, no.
Yeah, we have been working this for about 2 hours. So
about an hour and a half, but it's also 2.5 hours past my bedtime.
Well, we'll consider your word of wisdom to go through your Steam catalog and see if there's anything you forgot about.
Yeah,
or your platform of choice.
Completely forgot about.
Right.
I remember I picked up a copy of Keep Talking and Nobody Dies to play with my brother, and then we never got around to playing it.
So somebody died.
There were no survivors.
I'm sorry, Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is a much better name.
Ah, yes.
It's a bomb defusal game. One person is playing the game, the other person is reading to them. And they're specifically not looking at the screen and playing the game, like they're looking at a PDF. Or even better, if you've printed the thing off.
It sounds like one of those action movies from like the 80s or 90s where like the internet wasn't really a thing and even cell phones wasn't really a thing, and there's like a guy trying to defuse a bomb and there's some guy in the guy in a chair, TM, who's like, okay, now you got to look for this wire and do this thing.
That is in fact exactly the game.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You are like, okay, so I've got a bomb. It's got 6 panels on it.
Right. It's like Blown Away or Speed or some shit.
Yeah. And the panel in the upper left-hand corner's got 5 wires, a blue one, a red one.
Yeah.
What's the serial number on the bomb? Like, that's the game. That's how you play the game.
And for extra bonus fun, you do impressions from your favorite movies, like you're acting out that scene. Like, okay, I'm going to be Keanu Reeves. You talk to me here.
What do you do? What do you do?
What do you do, Hotshot?
Right?
Pop quiz, Hotshot, and that was it.
Yeah.
Shoot the hostage. What?
All right, so I think we've about wrapped this one up.
Yeah, we're pretty much out of time, but if you think that we left something being unfair, mention it to us in the comments on wherever you're listening to this.
Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
And Neil, don't forget to link the extra credits thing, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Also, do check out the extra credits video. It's pretty darn cool.
All right.
In the meantime, though, this has been Neil.
The one true Ben.
And
Mike.
And we will talk to you next time on Geek Fanthology. Bye-bye.
Go home, Chuck.
Craig.
Can't even remember his name.
This podcast is a production of Working Theory Productions. It was brought to you by the letter U and the number 118. Opening theme is Ultra Mega Hyperstorm and ending theme is March of the Mind, both by Kevin MacLeod. If you enjoyed this podcast or know someone who would, please consider sharing it on your social media, sending us an email, rating us, commenting on any of our streams, liking, commenting, subscribing, all the usual things that help build the algorithm. If you really enjoyed this podcast, please consider supporting us, either by making a one-time donation on our website or a reoccurring one on Patreon at patreon.com/workingtheory. A final thought. Check the rhyme.